welcome to yet another episode of the Disruption Talks, where we invite top experts to discuss digital acceleration, winning strategies, innovation, and scaling products. My name is Barbara Rybicka. I'm Consulting Director at Netguru, and today the key topic will be the future of dairy innovations for data and insights with Ritanbara Mundrey, the Global Head of Innovation and Insights for Dairy at Nestlé. Hello, Ritanbara. How are you today?
Hello, very well. And you?
Very good as well. And I'm really, really happy to host you today. And before we dive into the couple of questions that I prepared for the episode today, I wanted to get everybody to know you a little bit better. So I wanted to kick off with a question about your journey into becoming a global head of innovation at Nestlé. If you could share with us what were the steps and how it looked like for you, that would be great.
Well, I would love to tell you that I had this all planned 25 years back, and I went step by step in a very structured manner, but actually it wasn't quite so, as it happens in life. I actually joined market research or insights quite by default. I had done a survey during my MBA, and I was presenting it to some external consultants. They really liked the survey. I had done it very honestly. I had to interview 100 people, and I interviewed all the 100 people one by one. And I analyzed the data. I presented it to the external examiners who had come as a case study. And they happened to be from a market research firm, and they happened to be working for a client who was the competitor of the products that I had looked into. And they really liked my findings, and they offered me a job. So that's how I really started in this field. I knew nothing about what I was getting into. I just wanted a job, and I was offered a job, so I just took it up. But as I've grown in this field, I've really, really understood the power of what insights can do. I think it's a little under leveraged in the world today. People are running to sometimes launch products in the market or get there faster, but really foundational understanding of the consumer, of the marketplace, and really peeling the layers of the onion to figure out what consumers want, what will work, what's the kind of prices they're willing to pay. This hard work and this due diligence can get you really far. So it's a job that requires a lot of patience. It requires the grit to keep peeling the data and to look for that insight which is somewhere hidden in the haystack, but it can be very rewarding.
Okay. And would you say that your approach or perspective on innovation evolved over time, especially when you go back to the moment when you were doing your research? Would you say it evolved or changed over time?
I think it's a process of continuous learning because I know it sounds a bit like a cliche, but like all cliches, it is true that the more you get into the subject, the more you understand it, and the more you realize how complex it is. And it's almost like, I think for me, an innovation product is almost like a human body. There are so many cross connections, and every connection and every organ and every tissue has a role to play in the final output of the baby or the human body. It's a bit like that, it's not linear, it's complex, and the more you understand the complexity and the connections, the better you are to succeed in what comes out.
Okay, I agree that once you get into the complexity of the topic, you understand what you don't understand. That's the first thing that comes into light. And reflecting on your experience, what would you say was the most challenging aspects of driving innovation and leading innovation in the sector that you're in currently?
I think it's to convince business people that on the way you need to do things. And the challenge is not that they don't get convinced, The challenge is that some of the inputs that go in, like they say, um, everything that can be measured does not matter, and everything that matters cannot be measured. Sometimes the effort that goes into peeling the data or to connecting the data is quite intense, but it is difficult to measure and to go back and say this is a better way to do it. Sometimes you can only demonstrate it by being able to show the difference. And I really struggle with that. It's a bit like saying that if you are in the world of a 3310 Nokia and you've never seen an iPhone, you probably don't miss it because you've never even seen it. And it's only when you're shown the iPhone that you realize that, oh, you know what, this is a much better product than the older one. So being able to, sometimes it's a case by case demonstration that one has to make, and that can be a bit of a struggle sometimes.
Okay. Do you have any example from your experience of such a demonstration which went successfully and, let's say, shown your audience a better
Well,
way?
a very recent one actually. We were doing a project. And we're working on an innovation pipeline for one of our key businesses in dairy. And initially, when we were approached to do this piece of work, the brief was not even that we want to do an innovation pipeline. The brief was, we've not done a segmentation for 4 years. Can you just do the segmentation, and the agency should do a workshop? And then when we engaged with the business, we said, why do you want to do this? What are you going to do with the results? How is it going to be used? How are you going to, where are you going to take it forward? Who are the stakeholders? The more we understood it, the more we realized how complex their business was and what they were struggling with. So I actually went back to them and I said, look, we can do it the way you want to, but we can do it in a different way. I was a bit lucky, or maybe I was just good at influencing the stakeholders. But one of my key stakeholders really understood what I was trying to get at, because I told him that, what, the segmentation is just one piece of the puzzle. We need to get in a lot more various pieces of data to be able to come out with something that is tangible. And he understood. I don't know how much he understood it or he wanted to give it a try, but I got some very good traction with him, and because of that, we've now approached this whole innovation piece in a very different way. And it was very complicated because it wasn't just within Nestle, it was with a joint venture partner of ours, so there were multiple stakeholders. So it was even more complex than a usual segmentation or an innovation project can be. But when we finished the first leg of this project, I've got mails saying that, this is the best innovation pipeline project that people have ever attended. So I think, but the only thing is they had to see the difference to know it. It's difficult to show it before you've actually experienced it.
And do you have any secret way of presenting such a difference? Because indeed, it sounds like a clue of getting the interest of the stakeholders. And I'm wondering if there's any secret sauce that you're having.
I think knowing what you're doing and why you're doing it, and knowing that really well. So being able to demonstrate functional understanding and expertise, and being able to then, at least, even if you haven't got the proof of the pudding because you're still sort of selling the idea, to be able to at least illustrate what that game change could be and how it could actually make a difference, helps. Sometimes it also helps if you're able to draw on past examples. But like in this case, I didn't have past examples. I just told them that, you can do it this way, but if we do it differently, if we get in more market signals in, if we look at what competitors are doing, if we look at what past mistakes. So one of the exercises I made these guys do is to say, what, this is not the first time you're doing innovation. So if obviously things have not gone right, or you're saying we're struggling with our pipeline, or our brand is under pressure, or this country is under pressure. Now, there is a reason for that. Some things we haven't done right. And before we jump into the next pool and want to swim the ocean. Let's at least take a step back and see what went wrong. So one of the things we did as part of the exercise was also to do a post-mortem and say, you know what, these are some of the things that we have done wrong. And some of the things that have been, marketers get wrong are almost laughable when you look at it as in the past, with past wisdom, with hindsight wisdom, because it'll be like, oh, you know what, I shouldn't have crossed €2 as a price point. I know this doesn't work. Simple things. So in a way, when we kicked off this pipeline work, we talked about how basic some of the mistakes can be, and therefore it's important to learn from them.
Okay, that's truly inspiring when it comes to analyzing and drawing the conclusions out of and learning from the mistakes as well, in a way.
Yeah.
And it brings me to another question that I wanted to ask you, and the topic that I wanted to discuss with you, and that's about fostering a culture of innovation in general. And I'm wondering, as a leader, do you have any ways of fostering a culture of innovation and curiosity within the team? Because I can guess it, but I think that the reason why your research back then was so successful as well was pure curiosity that you had to go and interview 100 people.
I think that there are two different parts to this. One is what one personally does to sort of stay ahead or be engaged with the subject, and one is the organization. I have to say that in the organization that I work in presently, there is a big need and understanding of what innovation can do. And I feel in general, when you look at lots of big companies, they do understand that innovation is a key driver of brand growth, of business growth, of staying ahead of the game. So I'm not sure one has to sell the fact that you need to constantly innovate to stay ahead so much to the business. What one does need to sell is the fact that innovation is, and this is something that that I have done in the past, and I continue to do, is to illustrate and to educate the stakeholders as well as the people we are working with on how tough innovation can be. We sometimes get in external speakers who speak on the subject. We look at data from Nielsen to show that, X number of products get launched, but just a few succeed. And then to say that, why is it that, it's so tough? What is it that makes it tough? What is it that you can do to be ahead of the game? So I think constantly understanding your environment and communicating it to all the people who are involved in that innovation, because I may be a person who knows innovation methodologies or understands how to get the insight and stuff like that, but it's still the idea that I deliver. Ultimately, there are product developers, there's the marketing team, there's positioning, there's advertising, there's sales, there's distribution. There's a whole it's like, there's a whole village behind that one little innovation that comes through. So fostering that understanding of the challenge, and therefore the need for rigor and doing it well, sometimes that comes from me and my team, and I think that is helpful. Like we did a workshop, not a workshop, we did a conference some 6-7 months back, and we invited people who were not just working on innovation. We invited general business people, got some really good positive feedback, because people do then, it resensitizes people to the environment that they are operating in, and I think it makes them more considered in their actions.
Okay. And can you share an example of a time when your team's innovative approach led to some breakthrough in product development, in dairy product development?
Yes, for sure. I think we've had quite a few successes. One of them, the most recent one, has still to hit the market. So I can't tell you the name, but it's for one of our flagship brands. And so this brand is extremely big for the dairy business. And one of the things that the business wanted to do. So most of the consumption of this brand actually comes from little children under the age of 12. And the need and because it's so big, everybody drinks it. So even though it's meant for little children, because it's a big brand, it generally gets consumed even by teenagers, by grown-ups, by adults, by parents, because it's really huge in this particular geography. But what the business really wanted to do was to specifically target teenagers, because they felt that at the end of the day, when you become a teenager, you're a little bit more grown up and you don't want to do what the kiddies are doing anymore. So they wanted to come up with a pipeline that actually spoke to teenagers. And when we did this piece of work, we did it in the manner that I was telling you, which is that we took a lot of consumer insight. We looked at marketplace. We looked at what our own product development team was actually capable of putting into the market, because sometimes innovation can sound really fantastic, but if it is something that can only come with a huge technology or a price the company cannot afford, or technology that is not available today or will take 6 years to actually land in the market, then it's just a dream. You want something much more tangible. So we looked at a lot of insights and breakthrough kind of ideas, but we also married them with the current capabilities and the infrastructure that we had at our disposal from an organization's perspective, and our strengths in the marketplace. So we married all that, and we came up with some concepts which we then tested in some 4 or 5 markets, and they've all done well. I mean, this was the first time I've seen such a green on concept testing. It was only because we put in a lot of effort to ensure that we were really, really insightful in what we are doing. And indeed, now it's already passed on to the business, where they are in the process of getting ready to launch something over there.
Okay, now I got really curious about what this product is. So
I will let you know once it hits the market.
Okay, brilliant, brilliant. Sounds really exciting. And what is the process of disruptive innovation in such a competitive industry that you're in? You touched a little bit upon it when you were just describing what you did with the team, but I'm wondering, is there one way to do it? Is there a process to follow? How would you explain it?
I think one of the most fundamental questions that a good innovation should answer is why a consumer will buy, or what it will do for a consumer. This is something that we often forget. I mean, I keep telling, I work for dairy, and I have to keep reminding all the people who work for dairy that, something, consumers don't have a separate bank account for dairy. It comes out of the same purse, it comes out of the same, wallet. And therefore, there are constant trade-offs and choices that consumers are making. And even when it comes to consumption, the cross category play of consumption is something one has to understand. So if you're hungry, you could have a fruit juice and you would still be satisfied to some extent. And if you're thirsty, you could eat an orange and your thirst could be satisfied. So it is not as if beverages work in separately, food works separately. It's all cross category, it's cross consumption. And when it comes to expenditures, when it comes to what people want to spend on, like going back to this teenage example, one of the things that people said was that, oh, you know what, teenagers are out of home more, so maybe we should look at a distribution model where we are more available in schools, or we are more available outside schools, which is fine. But something, when a teenager gets a little bit of money to spend on, they'd rather just tell their mom to go and buy that product for them, knowing the mom will approve because it's a good, nutritious product, and then spend their own money on something like gaming, or doing something which the mom may not approve of, or which is like special to them. So that time, the competition to your brand is not even coming from another brand or another product or another consumption. It's coming from digital. It's coming from the mobile phone or something. So I think understanding this complexity is really important. And therefore, for a successful innovation, or when you're approaching the subject, knowing why a consumer will buy it, or what is it that you will either solve, or you will create a new experience, or do something that will really be of value. I think that question is key. Many times people say, oh, you know what, there's a cost of living crisis on, so people are not spending, or there is people, this cost is too much. Actually, at the end of the day, it's about the value that you deliver. It is not, of course, price point matters, but value matters even more than price point. You'll have people spending enormous amounts of money on a holiday, and then when they'll go into a grocery store, they might worry about 2 extra francs that they've had to spend somewhere, or 2 euros here. It's because of the value, it's not because of the outlay. So I think constantly driving this message of why and what is the value you're delivering for the price is the key point.
Okay.
One of the key points.
Right. There's probably a long list of the key points.
Yeah, it is a long list, but I think that once you're able to solve for that why, it's really important.
Right. It's an important starting point, I believe. And when it comes to emerging technologies, what emerging technologies would you see as game changers for the dairy industry?
Look, to be honest, I don't really work in the technology area. I work more in the ideas space. So I work, and so the way we are integrating new ways of thinking or new methodologies is to really look at how we can get better, swifter, faster, more accurate understanding of either consumers or data, or to take the data and transform that, or to have the data and actually deliver it in more meaningful ways to our stakeholders. So, for instance, if we are looking at a trend, for the longest time, everybody's looked outside to see, okay, what's happening in the marketplace. However, these days you have social listening tools that can actually deconstruct the trend and then actually tell you that this is the ingredient that is actually on the rise, or it is expanding in terms of consumer. It can tell you what consumers mean. So I think using a lot of, and then taking some of that data and transferring that knowledge to product developers who are actually working on creating the product or understanding that product more is important. When recently we did an understanding of how consumers are decode the texture and the taste of one of our products, and we just one of the biggest discoveries was that while consumers really understand and want the taste to be sweet and to have a certain delivery, actually the sweetness level doesn't really contribute to that. It's some other ingredient that is helping raise the sweetness. It's like that other ingredient creates an environment in which the level of sweetness is more appreciated by the consumers. And that was technology that had got us to do it, because we ran multiple numbers of analysis in this to understand what's going on. So I think that's where really my work focuses on, than the hardcore technology of saying I bought a machine to produce this product.
Okay. No, that's absolutely clear and very interesting as well. When you refer to some specific ingredients that are creating the environment for other ingredients to be appreciated more. And how would you say that Nestlé does use data and technology to tailor the dairy products for new or for existing markets?
I think that the thing is that when it comes to food, it's and food and beverage, which is the area in which Nestle operates. While there is a general sort of let us say principles on which products are prepared, there is and there are some general recipes, and there is an area of operation, so to speak. There is that second level of fine tuning and tweaking to local preferences that does happen at the local level. So there will be not every product will taste exactly the same, because it is tailored to individual preferences. So I don't know whether you've been to Singapore, but if you go into the Singapore grocery store, you have Milo that sits there, which is a very big product for us from the dairy stable, and you'll have Milo from Australia, and it says that Australian Milo, and then it's the local Singapore Milo, because the tastes and the flavors are different. So I think that that's not a bad thing to do, because ultimately you should be able to connect with what your consumers really can appreciate and sort of relate to. Actually, I think one brand that manages this global and local balance quite well, in my view, is McDonald's. There is a standardization that McDonald's does. So anywhere in the world you go, you will get the same kind of French fries that you get, whether it's Japan or it's the United States. But at the same time, there will be some products that are sitting over there that are really customized in the way they are made to the local requirements. And I think that's really key to be able to continuously sort of evolve and be relevant, particularly in food and beverage. If you're a technology product, it doesn't matter so much. WhatsApp is WhatsApp. But even though you might say that, okay, languages or something like that, but at the end of the day, it's a fairly standardized product. But I think in food and beverage, you have to be far more mindful of who your consumer is and where they are.
Okay, that's a very interesting example that you shared. I think it's a part of an experience as well when you're in various countries to try the products that you know and to discover that they taste differently, or
Yeah,
to
yeah,
visit McDonald's and actually experience as well local flavors that usually there are within their menu. So indeed. When it comes to the technology products, I think there is some sort of a level of using them in different regions differently as well. So I think at the end of the day, it's all about what the consumer needs, as you mentioned as well, and what they
yeah,
want.
yeah, absolutely.
And can you share with us some sort of a specific market expansion strategy that was driven by insights from data?
I think there is a lot of, not just for Nestle, but for lots of brands, there is expansion that goes at the back of what the data is telling you. I can give you the example of a brand that I once worked on, which is a food brand, and this food brand was actually focused on. It's a snack brand of Nestle, and it is focused on. It originally, when it started off, was a snack that was being offered to kids when they came back from school. Now, one of the big and it really it's a very tasty product. It comes from the Maggie brand that we have, and it's extremely popular in some parts of the world. Over a period of time, while the brand continued to grow because they had got all the variables of the marketing mix right, one of the things that they began to face as a little bit of a concern area, or let us say a reason to not increase frequency of consumption. So when you ask mothers, why is it that you'll only give this to your kid three times a week or twice a week? Why not more often? One of the things that came back to us was that it has too much of refined flour, and consumers felt that refined flour is actually not good for their children to have so much. They should be having whole wheat. So the brand went ahead, took that insight in, and then it produced a variant, a line extension, which was made of whole wheat flour. And the interesting thing was that when we tested for this with consumers, and we did a volume estimation exercise, the business had put a certain target in terms of the kind of volume and tonnage they expected or wanted from the line extension if they were to go ahead and launch it. And the results showed that this line extension would not meet that target. It would be below the target. So I remember when I presented this data, the business had said, "Oh, but we haven't met our target." And I said that, you know what, you haven't met your target, but I would still launch this line extension. And he said, why would you do that? And that's where goes back to another question that you asked me about being a little bit more aware of where the market is going, and, taking in market trends and needs, and, looking beyond just one particular aspect of the data. And I said, you may not have met your year one, year two, year three target, but actually, if you look at a lot of the data trends and the data signals, it points to the fact that there is real need for this kind of a product in the market. So maybe not in year three, but over a period of time, this variant of yours will continue to grow and be meaningful to consumers. So even though I'm presenting the data, I'm telling you that you're in a good space. Maybe you're not great, but it's the right thing to do. And it's one of the few line extensions that this product launched that has continued to survive 15 years down the line and continues to grow.
Okay, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, so sometimes it's also going beyond the data, but you have to go beyond it with enough other data signals to give you the conviction that you're in the right space.
Okay. Thank you very much for sharing that example, and to sharing the example where you looked beyond the data, as you mentioned, and having our eyes towards the future, because I think back then you definitely, that's exactly what you did. How are you and how is Nestlé anticipating and preparing for shifts in consumers' preferences? And would you say that including healthy or exchanging current ingredients into more healthy ingredients is the trend these days?
I think it's definitely the trend, I think that I just wouldn't be speaking for Nestle if I were to answer this question. I'm sure many of our competitors are also with us when we are looking at again, the mechanics of getting there is the same. It's like saying how do you prepare for an Olympic race. Every athlete would more or less follow a similar kind of training. There's training, there's fitness, there's diet. Similarly, when companies are looking at the future, they're doing all of that. They're looking at their own technologies. They're looking at the marketplace. They're looking at consumer trends. They're looking at capabilities. They're looking at expansion opportunities. So I think that due diligence is almost part of the DNA of any big organization, including Nestle. I think that the interesting part that we are picking up is that while the need for healthier living or healthy living continues to grow, and I think it continues to grow because people are also living longer. So you're beginning to now find the we're seeing newer needs emerge as consumers get older, and those consumers also tend to be more affluent from the past, more educated, more aware. So the way they're evaluating products and making choices is far more sensitized and with more knowledge as compared to the past. So there isn't. I don't think that I'd be saying anything new if I said that the health trend is growing. I think everybody knows that. But I think that what we are picking up, and perhaps this is also known, but it struck me because I just downloaded a report just yesterday, which also reiterated that fact, which is that while people want to live healthy and they want to make better choices, they just don't want to become they don't want to live a hospital life. So they don't want to be completely devoid of pleasure. Don't want to be completely devoid of the good things and the good stuff. So I think this whole balance of being able to manage indulgence with healthy living is going to continue to. It has been the sweet spot for a while, but it will continue to be so. And getting it right, because sometimes you can. I can give you an example from a previous organization that I worked with. So we were in the organization was in the business of chips, potato chips, and they launched healthier potato chips. So it was, I think, lower salt, lower fat, lower fried, or whatever it was. baked chips is what they used to call it or something. And it didn't do well because, at the end of the day, the consumer said, I'd rather eat it less often, but when I eat it, I want a really good taste.
Right.
So, you know, I think that balance, I remember going to another meeting of ours, and some people, they were showing the new products that they are developing on various technologies, and one of them was a plant-based ice cream, and that guy was really really proud of it. But when I tasted it, it tasted so bad, and I was thinking, you know what, I won't want to have an ice cream that makes me feel like I'm having a medicine. If I have to have a medicine, I'll just have the medicine. So I think managing this is the real trick, and knowing, and then getting that right in terms of the frequency. What is it that consumers will be happy to have on a daily basis, and how do you trade that off with those big special treats? I think that's the other element. You will always want those special treat days, but you also want those little bites of happiness to keep you going on a daily basis. So I know I'm speaking very food and beverage, but that's the business that I work in, so it comes to me naturally. But I think this is the fine balance, and I'm not sure we always get it right, even in the recommendations that we give, but that's what we are striving towards.
Okay. Thank you very much for sharing that, and it's very relatable when you describe it as well. We have one question from the audience, which I would like to go for right now, and this is a question from Mary, and she's asking, how do you optimize the cost of innovation in the current business environment? And what are the areas you would look at when trying to cut costs?
It's an interesting question, but if you look at the number of products that companies launch, including Nestlé, and how many they pull back because they don't get their innovation right, I think, the cost of the innovation is probably not so much. It's the cost of failure that is higher than what you put into the innovation to start with. Um, Personally, and also, if you were to look into the entire expense account of an innovation, getting doing the due diligence, getting in the right inputs is actually a much smaller part of the cost. I think that it's finally when you're getting into communication or other aspects where the costs tend to rise. From our point of view, obviously, we don't have an unlimited bank balance that we can just continuously do things. So one of the things that I always encourage my teams to do is to start with mining what we know, because typically there is a lot that is already known, and therefore you don't always need to start from ground zero. And that itself saves a lot of cost. It saves cost, and it really puts you ahead of things, because you also save a lot of time. Rather than doing things from scratch, you're actually scraping what you already know, which also is a time consuming job, but it's less time consuming than if you were to start completely from ground zero. So I think there's a lot of that, and big organizations tend to have a lot of knowledge floating around, which sometimes they don't access well enough. So in our case, for instance, if we are doing something for a local market or a group of markets or a group of countries, the first thing that we do is to engage with those independent markets and ask them, we're working on this subject. Can you send us anything that you already know on this? So, engaging over there is important. I think there are visible costs and there are invisible costs. The invisible costs are things like, as I said, doing things that are already known, or doing things that will not work in the market because you did not engage with your final people in the right way. So you come up with something that works well from a theoretical perspective, but when you're talking to the local consumers in that geography, it actually means nothing to them. So I think having all this good market knowledge, data trawl, getting your connections together is in itself a time-saving activity for the company. And then, of course, using what you need at the time you need it, and at the level that you need it. So you don't need to sometimes do huge. I mean, I remember when I first came into this research, into this role, somebody presented something to me about a new product in which they were using a better technology to reduce antibiotics in milk, and they were showing me some research they'd done to show whether consumers like that or not. And I'm like, do you need to even ask consumers whether they want cleaner milk? This isn't a question worth asking. So I think also knowing what you need to ask and what you don't need to ask is important. So I think these are some of the techniques, but of course, I look at innovation as a doctor would look at a patient. Every patient is different and every patient deserves a different kind of treatment. It's not an assembly line. If one could do an assembly line of new innovations, everybody would be doing it. But actually it's very contextual. It's very, you need to get the context, the culture. In fact, somebody came up with a really good quotation the other day that, if content is king, context is religion. So I think getting all of that right, it can save the money of the company far more than if you rush into things and have to pull back, which is much more expensive.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Ritanbara, for sharing that as well. I have one last question for today's episode, and that's a little bit out of the box question, but I'm really curious to hear your answer on that. And I'm wondering if you had a magic wand to provide education to anybody in the world, what would this education be about? What would you say?
This is not related to innovation. Any education is the question.
Any education. If you would have chosen it to be for the innovation, then of course. But then it's an open box question.
I don't know whether I would educate people on a subject as much as I would encourage that if you get into a subject, give it the attention it deserves, understand it well, and really sort of engage with what you're doing in order to be able to produce or deliver whatever you're doing that for. So I think immersing yourself well in what you do and really, it's like it's like a painter paints. When the painter is painting, or when a musician is singing, they're in their world, and I think they engage with what they do at a different level. And I think if you do that, whatever you're trying to produce or whatever you're trying to achieve, whether it's an exam you have to take or an interview you have to give or a project report you have to write, it will be very good and it will be at a different level. And the person who's doing it will begin to enjoy it as well.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Ritanbara, for sharing all your answers today and for sharing all your insights today. Have a wonderful week. It was an honor to host you on Disruption Talks today. Thank you very much.
It was great fun, and I hope it was useful to the audience as well. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.